Are fairies real? Are leprechauns? How much of our unseen world is part of our real story? This is Patti Lucia, the host of Story Bridge. In the following episode, I talk with Liv Mokai Wheeler, a diviner and messenger of the little people. So I'd like to welcome everyone to another episode of Story Bridge with Patti Lucia. This is going to be, I have to tell people I am very excited and perhaps a little nervous, but that's okay, because this is going to be a different kind of conversation and different kinds of stories this evening. And as many of you know, my focus has always been on the power of story, the power of words, the power of language. You know, that's my thing. Today, the focus is going to be more on my mystical life, if you will, on our mystical lives. So much of what I've talked about has been a lot about our lives seen. What's the story of our lives, the life that we see, the life that we experience? How do we close the gap between our authentic lives and the stories we tell? And for me, there has always been an aspect of my life that is the unseen, that is the mystical. It is as much a part of my life as the seen aspect of my life. And I think that that's true for all of us, but it's a little bit harder to talk about, isn't it? For me, from the time that I was young, I have always explored the outer edges of belief. I liked the woo. I liked the odd things in life. I liked to ponder those things and have always, in a way, whether I was aware of it or not, lived kind of a mystical life, a little bit close to magic. And so this evening, I have a special, very, very special guest with me who is going to help me and you explore our mystical stories, that the story that connects us to the unseen aspect of our lives. Her name is Liv Mokai Wheeler. And I was introduced to Liv through a series of interviews she did with a man that I follow named Andrew Bartzis. Now, Andrew Bartzis is known as the Galactic Historian. You can look him up, you can Google him. I highly recommend it. But I have experienced over the last decade what many of you have experienced, is especially if you have lived a spiritual life, if you kind of explored the mystical, if you kind of you've been experiencing a sort of awakening. Many of you may have looked for gurus, leaders, thought leaders, and so forth. And what I've experienced over the last 10 years, and it may be true for you, is that many of these people that we thought held truths ended up not really, or perhaps being a disappointment to us or betraying our trust in some way. Some of our faith may have been a little shaken by our disappointment in some of these folks. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because I've had this experience over the years, and Andrew Bartzis is someone who has not disappointed me, who's somebody who has remained consistent in his message and steadfast. And these days, I hold that in very, very high regard. So when he did a series of interviews with Liv Mokai Wheeler, I sat up and paid attention. and that's all I needed, because Liv took it from there. I was absolutely drawn to her message, to her energy, to everything that she had to say. And so moved that actually when I speak of it, I get a little teary, because it is so moving to me. Liv communes with the contamblay, which are also known as the little people. And I'm going to have her tell you more about that. We have so much to talk about. I will say that when I extended I was so drawn to Liv and her message that I was compelled to send her an invitation to be a guest on my podcast. But as many of you know, my podcast is new. I still consider it a baby podcast. And I thought, is Liv really going to want to talk to me? Are the Kontomble really going to want to show up on my little podcast? And so I had a bit of, I'm going to say, I had a little bit of self-doubt, and I've shared that with Liv, and I share that with you. And so when I got the response from her assistant, Sylvie, I saw the email, and I didn't tell you this, Liv. I saw the email and I clicked it open so that I could read it, but I looked away and I had a side conversation with myself that went something like this. All right, you were courageous to invite her, and this was an act of faith, whether she says yes or not. You have grown from the experience. And if she says no, if you are not ready, well, then you will accept that humbly and prepare yourself to be ready. So either way, whether she says yes or no, it is okay, because this has been a growthful experience. And then I turned and I looked at the invitation, and it was an affirmative. And I was thrilled, of course, and then I was very nervous as well. So I have been looking at her website. We have so much to talk about, but with great gratitude, Liv, it is so wonderful to have you.
Oh, thank you so much, Patti. It's an honor to be with you too. And thank you for your beautiful heart and authenticity.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. There is so much for us to talk about, but I think that I want to begin with, you are known for being a Kontomble diviner. Is that right? So you commune with the Kontomble, and could you just share with us who the Kontomble are?
I first heard about the Contemplate through my longtime teacher, Maladoma Putrisome. Perhaps some people who will listen maybe will know about Maladoma. And so to speak about the Contemplate is, to first honor my longtime teacher for sure. And I guess in a way, a long story short, and is that I learned about the Contemplate, or maybe I started remembering the Contemplate through and with Maladoma, and in a very serendipitous way, 15 or 16 years ago by now. It was almost like this book fell into my hands. It was super serendipitous the way it happened. And then, when the universe brings signs, in triplicate or something, it's like, you pay attention. And then when I started reading Maladoma's book, I was already in studies with healing and kind of feeling my way almost intuitively into the spiritual dimensions without being conscious of what was happening. It was kind of just like following the trail. And then when I started reading Maladoma's book, I had one strong feeling. It was like, whoa, I knew that I was meeting my teacher, remembering my teacher. And then also when he was talking about the Contemplate in the book, or when I was reading about them, I just had this strong feeling like I knew they were real. So there were these really strong feelings and things that were happening, like I knew they were real. So Kontomble is, Maladoma comes from Burkina Faso in West Africa, which many people don't know where that is. So that's just right next to Ghana. More people I learned are familiar with Ghana than Burkina. So it's West Africa and it's right next to Ghana. And in Burkina, so Maladoma, he's an elder from the Dagra tribe, or the Dagra people of Burkina Faso. I've been to Burkina by now 5 times, so I don't know if there are other tribes also that say Kontomble, but the Dagra people and the people of Burkina Faso do refer to the little people as Kontomble. That's their name for the little people. And I have since learned through lived experience also that there are little people all over the earth, and some have been kind of hidden in so-called, fairy tales or fables or something. That I realized folklore, that they're so real. So the Kontomble, they're little, like maybe about that tall, and they ultimately, as I experience them, they're ultimately from the stars, and they come into this dimension. All of the little people, I believe, are ultimately from the stars. That's the way I experience them, but they come through the the house or the vehicle, interdimensional vehicle of nature. So it'll come through trees and into mountains and water and all of nature, stone. So sometimes they're referred to as nature spirits, but I experience that as that's the element that they move through, and they're all over, like through the years, and more recently too in the past few years, have some native friends that they also know the realness of the little people. And one of my friends, Lakota, he talks about, you know, in their culture that there's 5 names for the little people, and the way he describes them, it sounds like it's the element that they're coming through, you know, with, connected to tree, mountain, the different ways that they come in. So they all, there's so many names for the little people around the earth, and Kontomble is the one from Burkina. And so if they've just been forgotten and I think misunderstood through time also, and they're with us, and some people are very closely connected to the little people. And we were also talking about like the fairies, the fae. To me, they all feel like relatives, you know, of each other. They're all very closely related. Or I've heard Maladama also speak to what he would say, Kontomble, you know, maybe in Scotland or something like that, they might call them fairies. So it's a very similar energy. And so when I first started reading Maladama's book, and I just had this strong kind of full body, like, and I was remembering them and remembering my purpose. And, you know, we get these strong sensations in life. And sometimes when people, they go to visit places, they have these strong sensations, and it's like beyond what your mind can comprehend, because our minds can be limited.
Yes.
Our minds can be limited, and they can also limit us to a limited reality.
Yes.
A limited reality. So yeah, that's a little bit about the Kontomble, or how I was first introduced to them, and also began my remembering, I guess you could say.
So let me see if I can recap that. I think that it's so beautiful, Liv. So the Kontomble, on this whole, that's kind of this race or multi-race of beings, come from the stars, and they do not incarnate through the womb of a woman. They come into this earth realm multidimensionally through the sentience of trees, rivers, stones, mountains, through nature. And so they become known as nature spirits. But that is how they come into our earth realm, or how they have come into our earth realm.
Yeah, and also I've heard, just because I almost, at first it was like the Kontomble, they were, the more I got connected with them and had initiations when I go to Burkina, and these things that happened through the years with when I would travel there with Maladoma, and felt like the purpose expanded, and it seemed like they were wanting me to help others to remember the little people all over, and also realizing that I would serendipitously connect with people in New Zealand and Iceland and all these different places that also knew the little people to be real in their regions. So yes, that's true. And also, so the little people have been supporting humans. It would be our ancestors, and there are I've connected with many, actually, by now, different Native people that I've met through the years that have told me stories, and I've heard so many stories around the earth. The stories have been preserved, and many people know that they're real. Since the beginning, they were helping our ancestors to know how to tend to the earth. They were teaching our ancestors so many different things that they're ultimately they're earth guardians in a way. I think all of the little people are earth guardians. They look after the earth and they help humans to understand, like, I think a lot, the aliveness of the earth, of the ocean, of the whales, and to know that we're family, that we're connected to the earth. The other day I heard it said that we share the same DNA as our trees, as our tree relatives. For there are a lot of people who understand that we're kin, we're all connected. And so the little people, they've been helping humans to evolve, and they bring in, it's like culture bringers. So like they bring through like music, and a lot, when I feel into their dimension, I feel artistry, and so they'll inspire us in these ways. And I feel that so what is it to evolve? Like, what is it for us to evolve? What is it for us to express in our like higher capacity or our higher selves as humans? Is that we're not simply here to be trying to survive, that we're honoring, and we're tending, and we make offerings, and we are aware that our energy impacts other energies, not only humans, but into the natural world. And it is all connected. For us to remember, it's not merely a concept. We are all connected, and that we remember that we are here also to tend to life, to tend to the natural world, not only in the physical, but also there's much more than the physical. Just as we as humans in our human, we know what it feels like to be met only in the physical, and we know what it feels like to be connecting soul to soul, or in the deeper ways, and it's a different experience. So they teach us all of these things, and to be in harmony with the natural world, and to be in harmony with our human family, and to like share artistry and music and all of these beautiful forms of existence, something like that.
Which are really, you're speaking to this essence of humans that is about creating, being part of Earth, which is so much a part of creation, creating new.
Yeah, remember that we are forms of creation. Like, yeah, we are born from the creator, the creatress, or however exactly you see it. To remember the joy and the beauty of creating, to remember that we're not simply here to consume, consume her. We're not here only to consume and to survive, but to create and to share, the beauty, and to honor the uniqueness of our spirits and our souls by allowing the uniqueness of creation that would come through each of us differently. If we are really honest with ourselves, I feel, similar but unique, to honor that uniqueness of creation.
And for those who really feel connected to what you're saying, we can connect with the little people. We can connect through, I'm thinking, I certainly felt a certain connection when I was in Tennessee and walking up the mountains by the streams and watching the water flowing over these rocks. I mean, the mountains I was in just a few weeks ago, they are something like 300 million years old. So it is amazing. So are those the kinds of ways, what are some of the ways that someone could open up their hearts to the Kontomble? And are there things perhaps that one should do in preparation for that, not just to go into it, opening up for that kind of communication before we've perhaps done some of the preparation for that kind of communication, in honoring them, because I think often those of us who are on spiritual paths, we sometimes we kind of rush, they say fools rush in, we kind of rush into experiences that perhaps we're not ready for. So I want to also be careful about that as well.
I feel like the way I experience the Kontomble and the different little people is, well, they try to remind humans also of our inherent goodness, and that it is so innately human. Like, we have inherent goodness, and it is, it's sometimes called hospitality and things like that. Just older, it's like older generations, maybe sometimes it's kind of been like stamped out of us, the genuine kind, just like
Mm-hmm.
a neighboring villager comes into another village and they share their food, and they share their, like in Burkina Faso, it'd be sharing, like offering millet beer in a calabash or something, that you're like,
Mm-hmm.
and also sharing the food and everything. That is people. That's what the contemplate have reminded me a lot, and they kind of have deconditioned me through the years and encouraged me in different ways of deconditioning myself to remember, like, who are we really? Who am I really? And that is an inherent part of our humanity. We need to remember that. They ask us to, but so they appreciate, to put out an offering or something, and just out of the spirit of gratitude. Whether we feel them or not is one thing, but you can be sure that they're there. They're there. When we connect with our ancestors, when we connect with the Kontomble, when we connect with the Fae, when we connect to these little people that our ancestors knew well, just say thank you. Maybe just say thank you. We can start, maybe if it's the start for somebody, if they're connecting with these different beings, is just to start by saying thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for how you've helped my ancestors. It's, remembering that we connect with life also through gratitude, like praise.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
That's beautiful. Liv's website is Earth's Amulet.
First amulet, yeah. It's not clear when it's EARTH, Earth's Amulet.com. Yeah.
Wonderful. And so, in just reading through the descriptions, I came across things like, we are here to serve what is sacred, feeding unseen, so that it in turn may continue to feed life. And this is very much what you were just talking about. I love the words and the term restoring what is human to humanity. Oh my, it's beautiful. And the expression, the vast ecologies of spirit.
Mm-hmm.
There's something just about that kind of languaging that was
Mm.
really beautiful to me.
That I was smiling to myself too, because I feel like we were talking about, some people. I have a great honoring towards those of you all that are like writers or wordsmiths, or
Mm-hmm.
that. And I was smiling because I know that's a person that was helping with language too. I was sharing something with them, and he also is a talented writer. So I was smiling, thinking to myself, yeah, he is also. So I've had, there's different writers that have poured their medicine into the website, which I'm super grateful for. And I have an appreciation for the magic that can come through language like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I wanted to share with you. You offer one of the services is Contemplate Divination, which is that people can do. I want to make sure I'm getting this right. That people can do a session with you in which you are allowing the contamblay to come through you to speak directly to the person that you are doing a session with. And in on your website there was a something that was written, and it just reminds me of, we're talking about being able to reconnect with the contemplate and with the little people, and these spirits who have been with us right along, that it made me think of, in some ways, needing to return to a bit of childlike wonder, that that child in all of us. And there is a part of on your website that just touched me so that I wanted to share with the folks who are listening. And may I do that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is from the Kontomble. So this is on a page that speaks directly to that. So the Kontomble show me a vision of a little girl who makes her way into the forest with the heart of an innocence. She hums to the old tree. The tree responds by coming out of the deep slumber of dormancy. The elder tree spirit blinks his eyes with remembrance as well as surprise. The tree spirit, whose heart has grown sad and weary from seeing too many generations of humans forgetting how to listen with their spiritual ears, now with tears in his eyes, looks at this young girl with pure hearted love for the forest. There is a little girl that the Contemplate have spoken about for years that would return. She is the little girl who lives inside so many of us. She lived with the spirits as her best friends while growing up. Then we allowed the world to become louder than her and our hearts knowing. Time is twisty, bendy as the Contemplate show, while simultaneously the pure innocence of the little girl's heart has enlivened the ancient tree spirit. And now the grandfather tree is shaking her, encouraging her to wake up. The world needs to hear from us, the old tree spirit says. That touched me on so many levels when I read that, Liv, because as a writer, I think that's was absolutely beautiful. And it was also very close to an experience I had as a child in the forest.
That is amazing.
So, well, and I share it in my book, in my own book. But I grew up in a family of two religions, and so Sundays could be a little crazy because we went to two different churches, and that became very upsetting to me. And so I found myself running away on Sundays in between Catholic Mass and Baptist service. And I ran into the forest. So the forest was my sanctuary. Now, Sundays were not the only times that I escaped into the forest. I escaped often, but I would go into deep into the forest, and it's where I always felt at home. I felt in harmony. I felt peace, even when there were, there was a lot of strife in my home, especially on Sundays when there was tension between my parents. And my sanctuary was at the foot of an ancient oak tree. So it was in the middle of a pine forest. So there were all these pines, but in the middle of the forest stood an ancient oak tree with its branches stretching impossibly long out into the forest. And there I would sit, and felt absolute peace in the sanctuary of this ancient oak tree. And so I am not the only one. There's so many.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, and thank you so much for what you've shared. And it brought tears to my eyes then also. But it was expressing what they were showing to me, and then I wrote it out and could feel the tree spirit in it and could feel the little girl. But something I've learned in more recent years through I guess you could say, like, assignments that they sent me on, and they were asking me to go. It was always going into the unknown, go to Iceland, go to Mongolia, go to all these different places around the world, and they would give me these assignments to do there, and like these spiritual assignments. And then when I would go to these places, sometimes I'd hear from the medicine people or the shamans or the people, like the bridge people there, and they would say, like in Mongolia, I remember the shaman saying, oh yeah, the mountains called you here, or, you know, hear these different things from, it would be reflected in a different way through the people there who are connected to the other world. And or what I realized, and especially I remember one of my favorite experiences in this lifetime on earth has been like with a group of women in Mongolia on horseback. And, you know, like they would give us these assignments, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I have to learn how to ride a horse, you know, to go there. And we were there, you know, women from different parts of the world, and it felt so exhilarating and like so alive and so ancestral, and so like connecting with this aspect of the feminine that I think in modern times has been domesticated. And it's the wild feminine, connected to nature, and she hears the trees singing to her, and she hears these things. And that's what I realized is Moro is getting in touch and remembering that aspect, that it's like the little girl with like twigs in her hair and just like, you know, loves nature and everything. And this is a part of the feminine, or something that is, yeah, it is feminine. It's receptive, like feminine in the sense that she's receptive, she's connected to nature. And you know, she's of the wilderness, you know. And so when you say that too, it's like, remember, it's such an important aspect of what I experience as the feminine, you know, the wilderness. She's connected to the wild, you know. And so I feel it's so important that that doesn't get like too domesticated. So a lot of times in these rituals around the earth, that I've heard the Kontomble so many times are encouraging all humans, but also, because a lot I've worked with women, is like, break free of the shackles. Yes. You know, let them come off of you. Yes. Saying that we have to be this way or that way, or the way we tell our stories, or the way we speak, or the way we do this, it has to be, it's so confined, it's too narrow. Life doesn't live there anymore. You know, when it's too confined and it's too constrained and it's too sophisticated, life doesn't live there anymore. You know, to remember the vitality of existence. It's our spirit. You know, like we want to feel alive, you know.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And so connected to nature and to creation. Getting our feet dirty.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You know, getting a little dirt under our fingernails, and leaves in our hair.
Yeah. Like, oh yeah, we're of nature too, you know. And when you spoke about Andrew too, I always like, he and I will be connecting again soon. It's an ongoing thing that we're doing, which I love. And that's why I was telling Andrew too, to me, he's a breath of fresh air, because people think that it's we put these constraints, so many constraints, like spirituality has to be within these constraints, or this. And I love Andrew's just like raw,
yeah, absolutely,
that, you know, he has he hasn't shared it yet, and I haven't shared it yet either. Our recent time that we connected, the Kontomble were asking me to ask him like about the medicine of irreverence too, that it's just kind of like shaking it up a bit, you know, to find what's real here. Just like what you were sharing about, that we find out maybe these people aren't who we thought they were, who we believed them to be. And that's what the Kontomble, they've always shared. They always asked me through the years, like, show your vulnerability, you know, show you're human. And that's why I think they asked me to write the book, that I would tell them. I kind of wrestled with them a little bit. I was like, no, don't ask me to do that, because I have a respect for writers. And I was saying, I'm not a writer. I know, like, I really respect writing and the artistry of it. And they were saying, but you can tell your story. And I feel people need to understand, like, you know, spirituality also lives inside of the depth of our humanness. It is absolutely human, you know.
Absolutely. So And I really do think that is so much the power of story. When we can tell an authentic story, there is so much connection that can happen, so much learning that can go on, that it is so much more powerful than picking up some kind of textbook filled with facts or knowledge or
Absolutely.
whatever. You know what I mean? Like the power of story. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'm looking forward to reading your book, by the way.
I actually have ordered yours, and so I'm looking
Oh,
forward
okay.
to reading yours.
Thank
I would
you.
love to. So I'm going to, let me see. The title is, yes, With the Love of the Ancients, My Journey of Remembering. So you wrote this in 2018.
Mhm.
And this is available on Amazon, Barnes and probably all the usual places, right?
Amazon. I don't
Mhm.
know. I at least know it's on Amazon.
Okay. Would you like to say a few words about what it was like? I know you've already said you were kind of in a
Oh, no,
tussle
that's
with the
fine.
contemplay about whether to write it or not.
Oh, yeah, it was. Yeah, because that's, I mean, I remember was to speak about the connection even with the Kontomble. I mean, we were talking about this a little bit before I think we started recording, but speaking about how to some people it would seem like fiction
Mm,
hear somebody talk about little people like
yes.
ancestors. Maybe they can stretch into that. Okay, they've come through dreams, they know it's real. You know, maybe their grandma came to them in their dream and they knew that was really their grandma or something. And I believe it's because of the depths of our conditioning why it would even seem strange that little people would be real, or all these
Hmm.
different beings, like what you said, mystical too. A lot of times the little people, they're spoken about as coming out of the mist. So it's interesting
Hmm.
using the language mystical. They're of the mist.
Hmm.
Mist connects us to the other world. It's the water. But the way I experience it, or the way I believe it is, it has to do, well, part it has to do with conditioning, because I have traveled to many different cultures, and that's what I realized. I was like, oh, okay, so it's people who are still in rural areas in the country, or indigenous, what is known as indigenous, that also could be said as like not been gone through the same gone through a certain kind
Yes.
of programming that comes from television, that comes from like education and everything. Age 0 through 7, it's there's not the discernment. It just goes in. Whatever you're experiencing, you just experience it as truth. And
Yes.
so, you know, there's ways that it's common that many of us have had similar programming. And that's what I realized. It's like the modern person, more often than not, that's having these ideas about the spirit world. And the way I experience it, it's partly programming, but it's also it's a matter of how open our energy centers are. So sometimes even if a person has a particular programming, then maybe through their yogic practices or through their meditation, they're like all of a sudden experiencing things that, oh, I didn't know that was real. It's just has to do with open energy and an open
Mm,
mind, you know,
mm,
to be able to experience more of what exists and more of who we are. So I, through the years and through my deconditioning and also becoming more and more open energetically, spiritually, I experience them, that I experience them very viscerally, physically, even. I experience spirit at this point very physically, viscerally. And so the Kontomble, they're very powerful beings. And so when they want something, they know, like, could I say no? I probably could say no, but I also trust them, and I know that they can see so much more than I can, and so much more into the future. And I know that they're really ultimately trying to help me develop my
hmm.
purpose. And so I was in a practice of just at a certain point, I just jumped and I just was like, okay, I'm going all in with spirit. They were asking me to leave the States and to journey onwards. And meanwhile, all these invitations were coming in different countries and cultures, and people asking, you know, to share the medicine in different places. But the Kontomble, so I was saying yes to these different things, and then they were saying, okay, now write a book. And I was like, not that one. No. And I was in a wrestle a little bit with them. Like,
How did they insist?
I was resisting it. I was saying, because I was in a practice of sharing vulnerably and doing that a lot in interviews and in when I connect with groups of people and that. And I was like, Kontomble, really? You want me to write a book? And I was saying, I'm not a writer. And they were saying, but you can tell your story.
That's right.
And so it felt like, honestly, it felt like one of the most vulnerable things I've ever done. It's partly also knowing the culture that I come from and how modern people are conditioned to really be so critical. And I have that, I haven't worked through my own inner critic and everything. And so it's like, because I knew I would be myself in the sharing of the story and all of that, that I knew that was so important to have my voice intact. And there was some urgency about the time. It was like it needed to be done by the certain time. And when they've put me on these assignments, these seemingly like miracles will happen, and this person who's able to help me with editing and all of that, and all of it is able, and like Sylvia is amazing and help in so many different ways. And so it did, and it really was one of the scariest things I've ever done. And it's what I've experienced so far. Is it is true and it is real. Maybe no matter what your medicine is and no matter what you're here to express, there will be criticism. And
yes,
it may be even for you being just exactly who you are, and people will find fault in that, which is the fear, right? Which keeps people from doing it. But also, and what's more important, I think, for people to know is there will be people who will, it's like they're waiting to hear that voice. They're waiting to hear that thing. And even especially because it's said in a simple, accessible,
absolutely
relatable way, where people will say, I can do that.
yes.
Yeah, you can do that, because I didn't embellish my voice in a way, and that was important. So people know that they can be themselves, and that's going to be enough.
It's the allowing yourself to be completely human that creates an environment for we humans to look and say, oh my God, I can just be completely human. That's what it looks like. And and people might not even comprehend that that's kind of the connection that they're making, but it's almost like, oh my goodness, I can just be me. I can just be human. And there's something beautiful in that.
It's a liberation.
Yes.
It's a liberation that it's like you don't have to go through all of these hoops and different mazes or something just to feel like you're able to be you, that you have to keep putting yourself into different forms and formulas and put yourself into some formulaic expression. It's a lot of work. And realizing that, I mean, a lot it's too, because meeting people around the earth from different cultures and also hearing them open up and hearing, oh, we all experience such similar things. We all have fear. We have fear of rejection. We don't want to be outcast. We don't want to be shunned. We want to be loved. We want to be accepted, you know? And we can just let it be more simple, that we don't have to put all these parameters also on, if a person is all these things, then I'm going to love and accept them.
Right. Like conditions
on
all that.
The conditions, all the conditions, yeah.
And the conditions we put on ourselves.
Absolutely. The conditions that we put on ourselves. I have to do all of these things until I can just be okay with myself.
That sounds like a lesson that is probably taught over and over by the Kontomble.
I know, and it's kind of humorous to me too, that it would be these multidimensional, almost like star beings that would remind me or us how to be human. I mean, it's interesting, but to understand that there is something to be said for the ways that we as humans have been interacting with metal and it's interesting. It comes through. They're sharing this right now, so I'm saying it, and
Sure.
I haven't said it before, but it's like interacting with metal, like the machine, where technology
Yes.
in a kind of ways that we've been interacting with something artificial that's been asking us to be artificial. So to come back to return to honoring of metal in its raw form, in its pure form, coming back to the pure forms, remembering what is real here.
Right. So even, for instance, the machines and the sophisticated machines we've made on Earth are still made of elemental things like metals and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and so to even honor, so in some ways to honor that.
Even that, yeah, it's interesting because you'll learn this if you read my book too, that I have like such a love and respect and reverence for the Bali people and Bali culture, and I've been so grateful to have spent time there. And I would love, because time in there, like a day for honoring trees, and there's a day for honoring metal, and they understand spirit is alive and everything. And when we honor things as such, it's like it's this kind of like tearing into the earth, and the like commodification, and the everything gets kind of denatured in it, kind of unloved and uncared for and objectified. It's the
and exploited.
Like everything is just there for the taking. What happens when we just remember like it all is alive? And maybe some person would see it as like consciousness is alive in everything, or I see it as spirit is alive in everything. And so we can come back to the restoration of care for life, really. Yeah, it is. It's definitely a steady message that they bring.
So can you say a little bit about how you connect with the contamblay? I know you use bells, and what that experience has been like for you.
Yeah, well, yeah, so I have bells that came from one of the initiations that I went through when I was in Burkina, one of the 5 times that I journeyed there with Malidoma and other journeys also. So I have bells that came through initiation, and there was different initiations that I've gone through that I didn't know. I was divining in other ways first, and I didn't know that I would be a voice diviner, so they would communicate through me. And it was one of the journeys there where I went to these contemplate caves where they come in physically. I wrote about that in my book, but it was such a like a powerful experience meeting them in that way. And then this is talked about. It happens a lot. People refer to this sometimes as like, I guess it's sometimes referred to as like a shamanic death, or it happens a lot with bridge people, that you have these near death experiences or are really sick as a child or something like that, but which enable you with these abilities, or they get switched on in a certain way. So it happened one of the times when I went to Burkina. It wasn't like I had any conscious desire to do that, and nobody like taught me or something. It was going through the initiations where I was, had different herbs and things that the like would be like the shamans there that I was working with. And then they didn't tell, nothing is spelled out. It said, okay, so what's going to happen? Oh, just do it, you'll find out. So you like ring the bells and everything, like, okay. And then so it was one of the trips that I went there, and I met with the contemplate in a cave in the mountain. And when I came back, it seemed like they even right now say it didn't seem that's what happened. Basically what happened was I came back. I was living in San Francisco at the time, and when I came back, technically what happened was I had malaria, And so, but I didn't know, and I was in denial. I didn't want to believe that I was that sick, but I was going through this really intense malaria in my system, but I was in denial about having malaria. And so it was these like really intense fevers that were happening until finally at the point I was like, oh my God, I've got to go to the hospital. So I went to the hospital on New Year's Day. My friend brought me, and by that time I wasn't able to see clearly, and I was not able to talk or anything clearly. And I was dying. I mean, I was dying. I knew that I was dying. And so by the time they took me into the operating room or the emergency, I don't even know where they were coming to test me. I told my friend, I said, I need you to call my mom and tell her I'm dying. And she was like, you can't ask me to tell her that. And I just knew I was dying. I just knew. And I was I was like vomiting, and I couldn't see, and I was hearing funny. And then when I was vomiting, I could feel the contemplate. I could feel death so close. I could feel like death's gate was right there, and I could also feel the contemplate so close. And I was asking them, I was like, what is happening? Because when I was vomiting, these like squeaky sounds were coming through my, I was like, what is happening right now? And they were saying, initiation. And I got really angry because I was like, how many fucking initiations do I have to go through?
You're in the emergency room on death's door. You're like, are you kidding me?
I was super angry, and I was like, fuck initiation. How many initiations do I have to go through? And they're like, I could like hear like, you know, that, and then that's what I was. And they tested me, and they don't normally apparently treat people for malaria in San Francisco. And so I was basically like a day from death, and the malaria was full. My system was full of the malaria, and they were able to get this emergency treatment in time. And it was just in the nick of time. Otherwise, I would be dead. And so it was a grueling initiation. And so I would like go through this month-long experience of every time I thought I was getting my energy back, I would get laid out again. And so through that, like through death in a way, it was teaching me about my love of life, you know. And then from that time, then all of a sudden these really weird sounds started coming through my vocal cords when I would shake the rattle and ring the bells. And at first it was this really weird, like shrilly sound. And thankfully I was in a really loud neighborhood in the Mission in San Francisco, like the Mission district of San Francisco was like, and my roommate also, she also worked with spirits. So I was like, sorry about this really sound, you know, and it was this whole thing, and I would cry a lot, and I didn't know what was happening, but it was really like, it was like they were stretching out my vocal cords, and at a certain point it just like took. So their language started streaming through, and they want such precision that, so they would speak in their language, and then I would say, it sounds like you're saying, and then they would say if I got it right or not. And that's the thing about words too. It's so precise. When it gets translated, they want it to be exactly like what they're meaning. And even if it gets translated in this simple form, it's multidimensional when it comes through. You've heard that? Like,
yes, it is. It's multidimensional, and you're saying it simply because I've heard it. And also the sounds that you make it's very like, when I listen to it, I think that is not it does sound otherworldly.
I can't, if I try to do that, like I have to go into the zone to be able to like to do that. I don't.
But you can hear the layers of meaning in the sound.
Yeah, you get it in a multidimensional way. I feel like you experience it in a multidimensional way. So and they're so precise about how they want me to translate it. And then if I get it right on, they're like, yes, that, you know, or they'll correct me if any word is off. But then I realize the way they are so meaningful with the way it gets translated, because it's like, could be that, could be that, could be that, could be literal, could be metaphorical, and it's like yes, and
Mm-hmm.
it's all of those
Could be
simultaneously.
all of those, yes,
Yeah,
simultaneously.
yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll say things, and I'm like, whoa, okay, yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
then yeah,
I love it. And I feel that we could go on, but I definitely know that you are a busy person as
yeah.
well. And I want to make sure that before we wrap up, and first, I just want to say I would love to have another conversation.
Absolutely.
After I've had the opportunity to read your book, I'm going to send you mine as well.
And
And
I'll look forward to it.
and so, but I definitely wanted to give you an opportunity to share how people can find you and what kind of services you are offering at this time.
So they can find me at earthsamulet.com. And then I have a YouTube channel that it's Liv Wheeler. So you can find it also through Earth's Amulet, or that'll connect with that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so we're going to start our Heart-Centered Shamanic School again in October. In the meantime, I have a few Kontomble 101 Kontomble sessions that are possible. There's just a few in between now and then, but also there's a Contemplate Divination training starting that's not the voice divining, but a form that the Contemplate have brought through that we'll be teaching soon. And also there's an offering on the website that's Cave of Gold, which is really about this kind of like monumental, pivotal time that we're in here on Earth. So it's a series of rituals, I think going until December, that it's the Kontomble coming together with community and sharing what they're seeing about what's happening and all of that. So
That's beautiful.
those are our primary offerings right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I will be speaking to you about some of that as well on a personal note. But this has been an absolute blessing and joy to spend this time with you, Liv. This is where you can reach Liv. I encourage it, and Liv and I will be having another conversation. I will be reading her book. In the meantime, I encourage folks to pick up her book. So we'll have more to talk about next time. And thank you so much. This has been a real joy.
Oh, thank you so much.
If you are interested in my books or services, or would like to share your story on Storybridge, visit PattiLuciaWrites.com. Thanks for listening.